On September the 24th, 2024, Alice Webb lost her life. Less than a year and a half later, a man dubbed the Lip King was found dead in a London hotel room. So who was the Lip King really? Why was he arrested for Alice Webb's death? And how did he end up becoming a victim of the same toxic beauty culture that he helped promote? Before he was the Lip King, Jordan Parke was just a young man who, like many others, didn't like some aspects of the way he looked. This isn't unusual, of course. Most of us have aspects of our face that or appearance in general, that we like to change. A little tweak here and there, especially when we were younger. Every year, millions of people worldwide undergo some kind of cosmetic procedure, whether it be Botox, fillers, implants, liposuction, or any of a long list of popular procedures. Most of these can be done on your lunch break nowadays. Some people are perfectly happy after one successful treatment, others might have a few more done throughout their life, and for some it seems to become an obsession, leading to them to make constant and increasingly dramatic changes to their appearance until they're completely unrecognizable. Jordan sadly seems to fall into the latter category, and although the stories of many people who become obsessed with cosmetic treatments are often scary, Jordan's own story ended up being darker than most. Little did he know that his first step on the path that led him to fame, notoriety, and eventually his own death came when he was just 19 years old. It was at that age that Parke got his first cosmetic procedure. Having his eyebrows tattooed on, he said that this became a regular procedure for him and that he used money from his student loan to pay for it. This of course quickly escalated into using Botox as well as fillers in his lips, chin, cheeks, smile lines and forehead, but his lips soon became his main obsession. He started having more and more lip filler to the point that his lips began to look swollen and actually very painful. It was this new look that got Jordan, who was just 23 at the time, a spot on US TV reality show Botched in 2015. We've talked about that show a fair bit on this channel. On Botched, they discussed his bloated looking lips and the fact that he had experienced filler leaking out of his lips, as well as talking about how he got to this point at such a young age. The show described him as a filler addict, with Jordan admitting that he was addicted to the lip filler and that he usually got 4 milliliters in his top lip and 2 in his bottom lip, which, in case you didn't know, very simply, it's a lot. During his consultation with the doctors, they warned him that his leaking lips could cause a horrible infection and that he was asking for horrible complications, as well as confirming that he had already developed a complication called cheilitis, I believe it's pronounced, which is an inflammation of the lips that makes them dry, red, painful, and itchy. This was only a couple years after he had first started getting lip filler, with the first time apparently being when he was only 21. Jordan also made it very clear on the show that part of what he loved about his over-the-top appearance was the attention that it got him. Whether it was good or bad, didn't really seem to matter. He actually said, "I'd be like so normal and boring without them," referring to his lips. "If that's the look you want to go for, good luck with that, but I would not like to walk into a room and people not notice me. Whereas my lips walk into the room and people are just like, oh my God, I want to get to know him." That's what I want at the end of the day. You know, I love walking around and I love people nudging their friend and being like, oh my God, look at that guy, look at that guy, look, look, look. I just love that. He also added later, looking fake, you just walk into the room and people want to know you and you just like pop. I love attention. Well, luckily for Jordan, the appearance on Botch kickstarted his public profile and he went on to appear in a wide variety of TV shows, including This Morning, Body Shockers, and Celebrity Botched Up Bodies, where he was always brought on to discuss his obsession with cosmetic procedures. And it seems like this attention just fueled his obsession even further, with his appearance changing dramatically over the years. Believe it or not, these photos are all the same person. People were starting to express concern for Parke during this time. Many were worried that he was suffering from body dysmorphia and that he needed help with his apparent cosmetic surgery addiction. I've talked about cosmetic surgery addiction in this video here. It's a real thing. He even went back on Botch in 2019, where they refused to give him another nose job, saying it would involve taking a piece of his rib and inserting it into his nose, and that they felt like it was far too risky. They also advised him against any future plastic surgery, saying he'd end up in a vicious cycle. One of the doctors even said if he keeps going on, he's going to destroy himself. If only they'd known how accurate that prediction was. But none of this stopped Jordan, and by 2024, he'd built some some level of fame on social media with thousands of followers on Instagram and TikTok. By that point, he'd apparently spent over £130,000 on cosmetic procedures, including lip fillers obviously, as well as Botox, multiple nose jobs, eyelid surgery, jaw and neck liposuction, a chin implant, and a non-surgical thread facelift. He'd also opened up his own aesthetic clinics in Manchester, Dudley, the West Midlands, Gloucester, and Bristol, and he'd somehow managed to establish himself as the self-branded lip king on social media. It always scares me when someone who clearly can't tell when to stop with their own cosmetic procedures is in charge of performing them on other people. It's a massive red flag. For years, people have been saying that Jordan was doing serious damage to his appearance, his body, and his health, and that one day he would go too far. But Jordan didn't seem to care. Many felt like he was way too focused on the fame and the attention that he was getting to be worried about the consequences of his own actions. But sadly, those consequences didn't only affect Jordan. Alice Webb was a 33-year-old mother of 5 when her life came to an abrupt and devastating end. She worked in the beauty industry, and on the morning of September the 23rd, 2024, she was attending a training course run by the Lip King himself. She apparently expected to be home in time to pick up her kids from school, but sadly, that would not be the case. The course took place at the Studio 23 clinic in Gloucester, co-owned by Jordan Parke and Gemma Paulzin. The day allegedly involved Jordan teaching the attendees how to safely carry out a non-surgical BBL, a procedure that actually uses filler injections to shape the buttocks rather than physically transferring fat into the area, also known as a liquid BBL. But whether Jordan was qualified to teach this kind of procedure is something many have questioned, and for a very good reason. It's unclear how many people were in attendance at his training session that day, or if Alice was there on her own, but what reports do state is that after the training course was finished, Alice apparently had a liquid BBL performed on her by Jordan. This was a man she trusted. I've seen some awful comments about Alice Webb and how, well, she shouldn't have had this procedure done. When you think somebody is qualified to do something, you presume it's going to be safe. You presume they're trained. You presume they're trained in all the health and safety aspects. He was the training leader after all. He'd been on TV. He has his own salons, like a branch of salons. But sadly, her trust was misplaced, as during the procedure, Alice became seriously ill. It was unclear exactly what happened after that, but Alice's sister told the BBC that she had been in touch with Alice quite a lot that day until suddenly Alice stopped texting back. Hours went by with no response to her calls or messages until finally someone picked up. But it wasn't Alice. It was a paramedic. They told her that Alice was unresponsive and was being rushed to hospital. They took her to Gloucestershire Royal Hospital and her family rushed there to be with her. But it wasn't good news when they arrived. Doctors explained that Alice's condition was extremely serious, though specifics of her condition haven't been released. In the end, Alice passed away in the early hours of Tuesday morning, with her mother later confirming that hospital medics had been unable to resuscitate Alice following the procedure. She was apparently the first person to die from a liquid BBL that was performed in the UK, although plenty of others have suffered severe complications and come close to losing their lives after this procedure, which is why a lot of experts and advocacy groups have been calling for tighter controls on what cosmetic procedures can be carried out without real medical training. Reports in the following days revealed that Jordan Parke and Gemma Paulzin had been arrested on suspicion of manslaughter in connection with Alice Webb's death. Both suspects were interrogated before eventually being released. Gemma Paulzin was told that she would face no further police action, but Jordan was released on bail while the investigation took place. No official charges were filed against either person. Parke's only comment to the news media immediately after his release was to say, "I can't talk to anybody, I was arrested, but I've been released." An inquest in early October 2024 announced that further investigation was needed into the cause of Alice's death. Some actually came to Jordan Parke's defense after Alice's death and Jordan's arrest had been made public. They claimed that it was a terrible accident, but none of us knew what really happened, and that blame shouldn't be thrown around without more details. For many others, though, Jordan's arrest was enough to deem him guilty, and for them, Jordan's behavior in the days, weeks, and months since then has only strengthened their belief that Jordan Parke was to blame for Alice Webb's death. In the days after Alice's death, Jordan was regularly approached for comment by news outlets outlets, but always refused to do so. However, around 2 weeks after his arrest, Parke got into an online argument with Dr. Roshan Ravindran, a GP, cardiologist, and aesthetic practitioner, who posted a video on Instagram warning his followers of the dangers of non-surgical BBLs in light of Alice Webb's death. He also claimed that Parke was unqualified to carry out the procedure and that Parke had administered an unsafe and excessive amount of product, nearly 15 times the recommended dose in one sitting. According to news reports, Parke apparently thought that it was appropriate to break his silence over this case by replying to this video saying that he trained with a Harley Street doctor and that he was fully qualified and insured to carry out the procedure. I actually couldn't find any of these comments on the post or any post from Parke's account saying this, so I don't know if he has since deleted those comments. Nevertheless, a lot of people thought it was an extremely unprofessional and insensitive way for Parke to finally respond, particularly seeing as he had apparently made no other comments on the issue before then. And it felt like to many, like he seemed more focused on talking about his credentials and insurance than about Alice's loss of life and the devastation that caused to her family, And things just got worse from there, with many onlookers feeling that Jordan's behavior over the last year and a half was not a good look for someone suspected of manslaughter. For instance, the BBC did an investigation into Jordan and reported in October of 2025 that he was selling prescription-only weight loss drugs illegally online using his Lip King aesthetics page on Instagram. They showed that he was openly marketing and selling semaglutide, which is what drugs like Ozempic and Wegovy are made of, to his fans on social media. It is illegal for someone to sell semaglutide in the UK without prescription. These products, when bought from an unregulated source, can obviously be extremely dangerous, as they could contain toxic ingredients that the legitimate version just doesn't. They even revealed that Jordan had been doing this for a very long time, pointing to another BBC article which came out all the way back in November of 2023, detailing one woman's experience buying weight loss jabs from Jordan on Instagram. Maddie, who was 32 at the time, bought a 10mg strength semaglutide jab from Parke for £200. She received a similar bag of 2 vials along with loose insulin needles, as well as a WhatsApp video from Jordan giving her instructions on how to mix the ingredients and inject herself. According to the BBC, these instructions included dangerous guidance advising her to take a higher dose than what health officials recommend. Bearing in mind, when you are prescribed this, patients do not start on 10mg, they start on something like 2.5 and you work your way up. So having to mix your own medication and starting on a dose that isn't a recommended starting dose is a huge initial red flag. After her first injection, Maddie said she was extremely ill, bedbound and vomiting. After bringing it up with Jordan, he just kind of like brushed it off, telling her it was normal and that it would pass. She believed him, so a few weeks later, when she'd finally stopped feeling nauseous, she tried again, this time just before going to bed. But she says she was woken up by the vomiting, adding it was bad. I was throwing up all night to the point where I was throwing up stomach acid, blood, and white foam. Alice's family were understandably furious when they found out what Jordan Parke was now doing, but despite all the evidence of his illegal activities, as far as I can tell, nothing was done about Parke's illegal sale of potentially harmful drugs. And bizarrely, when it was brought to their attention, police said that selling weight loss jabs without prescription wouldn't breach his bail conditions. Which begs the question, what would have breached his bail conditions if illegally selling potentially harmful drugs was apparently fine? That's crazy. But somehow that might not be the most worrying thing he's done since Alice Webb's death anyway, because in December of 2025, Channel 5 News, with the help of Save Face, an organization that runs a register of verified practitioners and advocates for patient safety, 100% worth checking out before you get anything done, ran an undercover investigation which exposed an unlicensed surgeon who was performing high-risk surgical procedures such as facelifts and eye lifts, not in a sterile operating theatre, but in the living room of a house in Manchester. She'd previously been caught doing the same thing in a flat above a restaurant in Liverpool. This fake surgeon was a woman named Luyen Vu, but these dangerous underground surgeries were being arranged for her by none other than the Lip King himself. And that house where surgeries were being carried out, in that living room, that was Jordan's house. Many people were obviously outraged that Jordan Parke would be involved in such illegal and outright dangerous activities whilst he was still on bail and being investigated for his alleged involvement in Alice Webb's death. But others felt like this was just in keeping with Jordan Parke's character. To them, he had shown by this point that he just did not care about the impact the procedures and medications he promoted, organized and sold had on members of the public. Rather than just gambling with his own life and well-being, Jordan was now happily gambling with the lives of others again. But eventually this lack of care wouldn't just hurt the people who trusted him, it would hurt Jordan himself. On February the 18th, 2026, Metropolitan Police officers and paramedics responded to a report of an unconscious person in a hotel room at Lincoln Plaza in Canary Wharf. When they arrived, they found Jordan Parke unresponsive. He was pronounced dead at the scene. In a statement, the police said, officers attended alongside paramedics and a 34-year-old man was sadly declared dead at the scene. His death is currently being treated as unexplained and an investigation to establish the full circumstances is ongoing. However, officers are reviewing information that suggests the victim may have been undergoing a cosmetic procedure prior to his death. Honestly, little other information has been released as of yet. However, a 43-year-old man and a 52-year-old woman were arrested 2 days later on suspicion of manslaughter in connection with Jordan's death. Both were later released on bail whilst investigation continues. Sounds familiar? As yet, there hasn't been any more updates, significant updates, I should say. I mean, Jordan's death is obviously sad. I don't want to suggest that it isn't. And his family and loved ones are obviously heartbroken because of it. But I've seen a lot of people talking about this, and I haven't seen many people mention how this affects Alice Webb and her family. I think it's worth remembering that Jordan Parke was still on bail in connection to Alice Webb's death when he passed away. Some reports even claim he was due to answer bail in March of 2026, which means he was legally required to return to the police station, though the reason for this is unclear. But Jordan was the main suspect in Alice's death, so I worried that her story might be forgotten now and everything we can learn from her story could be forgotten. Gloucester police, who were in charge of the investigation into Alice Webb's death, have already confirmed that her case will now be closed. They said an investigation by our major crime investigation team has been ongoing following the death of 33-year-old Alice Webb on Tuesday, 24th of September 2024. Alice had become unwell following a cosmetic procedure, and 2 people were arrested on suspicion of manslaughter in connection with her death. A woman was later told she faced no further police action, and a man remained on police bail until further inquiries were taking place. We have been informed that the man who was on police bail died recently, and therefore the criminal investigation will close as no charges can be brought. Police inquiries will continue on behalf of the coroner, and an inquest will take place in due course to try and establish what happened. Alice's family has been updated, and we hope the inquest will enable Alice's family to have the answers that they deserve. So it sounds like some kind of investigation will still be taking place to determine Alice's cause of death. But it's been 18 months already. What are they going to find out that they haven't already? Especially now that they can't question their main suspect anymore. For their part, Alice's family have expressed mixed emotions at the news of Jordan Parke's death. They said, "We have heard the news that Jordan Parke has died. This brings mixed emotions as it inevitably reminds us of the deeply painful loss of Alice. Whilst we'll never see him face trial, our fight for justice for Alice continues. We remain committed to campaigning for strict regulations to prevent tragedies like Alice's. Our focus remains on honouring Alice's memory and advocating for meaningful change." What is worrying to so many is that almost 18 months on from Alice's death, there has been no meaningful changes to how non-surgical BBLs are regulated in the UK. At the time of Alice's death, there were no rules in the UK around who can carry out non-surgical BBLs, which meant that the procedure was being done in high street clinics by people with no medical training or qualifications, and somehow nothing has changed since then, which is absolutely fucking crazy to me. But a lot of people are starting to ask, how long is it going to take for that change to happen? How many more people need to suffer severe complications from these procedures? How many more people need to die before the British government does anything about it? One positive is that there seems to be a lot of support from industry experts for the kind of changes Alice's family are asking for. Ashton Collins of Save the Face, the organisation I mentioned earlier, has stated that liquid BBL procedures are a crisis waiting to happen. They are advertised on social media as risk-free, cheaper alternatives to the non-surgical counterpart, and that could not be further from the truth. And a survey run by Save the Face of more than 2,200 health professionals who practice aesthetic medicine found that 98% of them don't offer liquid BBLs because there is such a high risk of multiple complications. Save Face have also been campaigning alongside Alice Webb's family for the enactment of Alice's Law, which would make it illegal for anyone other than a registered plastic surgeon on the GMC specialist register operating from a CQC regulated environment to perform buttock augmentation procedures using hyaluronic acid dermal fillers. The British Beauty Council has also been pushing for a licensing scheme for non-surgical medical procedures, as well as calling for better training standards, mandatory insurance, and restrictions on high-risk treatments. It seems like they are making some real good progress from what I can see on their social media, and they're gunning for this. They are ruthlessly gunning for these. And outside of these major organizations, there is also growing support just among the general public for these kinds of regulations and restrictions to what more and more people are realizing are potentially dangerous procedures. So hopefully the government will finally do something about this and we'll see some real change soon. Hopefully Alice's family will get to honor her memory by helping protect other people from the same fate that she suffered. Hopefully no one else has to die before the government does what should have been done a long time ago.